Hey guys, in this video I'll be going over navigation for the F-14. The F-14 has different things for navigation. It has the backup compass, the gyroscopic compass, radio navigation, TACAN, and INS navigation. First, let's go over the backup compass. The backup compass is kind of hard to see. It's right here near the HUD. This is just a regular magnetic compass. You're probably never going to need this in DCS, but at least you know where it is. Next is the gyroscopic compass. This needle on top shows what direction you're going. So right now I'm going at about 340 degrees. It also has these two needles. The small one is for radio navigation and the big one is for TACAN navigation, and I'll go over those later. And it also has this little bar on the side that shows range in nautical miles. Now let's go over radio navigation. For radio navigation, you need to click 2 to go into the back seat, and you control it with this radio right here. You can use this to navigate to any frequency in the megahertz range. I'm in the F10 map, and if you see something like this here, these little circles, these are in the kilohertz range, so these radio towers are too low of a frequency. But one thing that you might use this for a lot is navigating to VOR stations. VOR stations are these little hexagons on the map, and you can see this one is in the megahertz range. It's 113 megahertz, so I could travel to there. The way that this works is that first you set this mode switch to manual. If you left click this all the way to the left, it will be on 243, which is the guard frequency. So then you right click it once and it will be on manual, and then you can use these switches to change the frequency. I'm going to change it to this here, which is 113.6. so let me dial in 113.6. and then for the power switch, if you have it in transmit receive or transmit receive guard, then once you're dialed in the frequency, you should be able to hear some Morse code. If you hear the Morse code, that means you're dialed into the right frequency. So then you can right click this into DF, which is direction finder. And when you do that, the audio will cut out, but the small needle on the compass will point to the radio beacon. And there's a compass in the back seat, and there's also one in the front seat. And if you look at this navigation display here, you can see this little house symbol will also point to the radio beacon. And the same thing for the pilot too. Now, it's not going to give you a range, so the range reading still shows 0. It just gives you direction. That was radio navigation. Now let's go over the TACAN. The TACAN is a navigation system that you can use to go to TACAN stations, which are this symbol here on the map. It's kind of like this triangle. Now, not every airfield has a TACAN station. The way you can know is you can click on the airfield and look for TACAN, and if you see something here, that means it has a station. But if I come up to an airport up here, you can see this doesn't have a TACAN station. TACAN's a lot easier because you don't have to deal with frequencies, you just dial in a channel number. Now the pilot has a TACAN panel here, and the RIO also has a TACAN panel right here, and they're both the exact same panel. And there's a little button right here in the pilot's seat that controls which TACAN you're using. You can use the pilot's TACAN or the RIO's TACAN. The RIO also has the same button. It looks a little bit different, but it's right here, and if you click it, you can see here's the RIO, and then here's the pilot. The way the TACAN works is that first you need to find the channel and the band. If you click on an airfield, you can see the channel is 76 and the band is X. There's two bands, X and Y. Most of the time the band will be X, but you should still check just in case. So I'm going to type in 67. It's actually dialed in already, but the way you do it is you'd click this inner knob to move the bottom number, and then you'd click on the edge right here to move the outer number. So I'm going to set this to 67, I'm going to set this to X. Then you have to turn on the power. There's 3 modes: receive, transmit receive, and air to air. Receive will give you direction but not range. Transmit receive will give you direction and range. And air to air is if you're connecting to an airborne TACAN station. Beacon doesn't do anything. There's also this switch that says normal and inverse, but inverse doesn't do anything, so I would just leave it on normal. And then you can turn up the volume to listen to the Morse code. Once you hear the Morse code, it means you're connected to the station and you can turn the volume down. By the way, there's also a switch here that says bit. If you press it, then it will test the lights. When you have the TACAN turned on, if you look at your compass, the big needle will point to the TACAN, and right here it will show you the range in nautical miles, but for me it's showing 0 because I'm right next to it. And once again, the same compass is also in the RIO seat. Also, if you look at the display right here, there will be this triangle which will point to the TACAN. And another thing you can do is you can switch this to TACAN mode, And what that will do is it'll bring up a course needle that you can spin around like this in case you're going to land on a runway. And it will give the course needle symbology on the VSD right here and also on your HUD. You can also control the TACAN from the Jester menu by going to Navigation and TACAN. Now let's go over the INS navigation system. The INS navigation system is what lets you plug in waypoints that you can fly to. The F-14 has different waypoints that you can plug in. It has regular waypoints, and it also has different special points, such as a surface target, a hostile area, and other things like that. For regular waypoints, you can plug in 3, and for all the other special points, you can only plug in 1. For example, you can only have 1 surface target and 1 hostile area. There's different ways you can plug waypoints in. First, I'll go over how to plug in waypoints with the mission editor. First, I want to mention that if you put waypoints in the mission editor, if you're doing a cold start, the waypoints will show up in your kneeboard, but they won't be loaded in the plane. You have to type them in yourself. If you're doing a hot start, though, they will be loaded in the plane. The way you add waypoints is that you click on your plane and you click Add, and then you just place them down wherever you want. Now, like I mentioned, the F-14 can only hold 3 waypoints. You can add more if you want, and they'll show up in your kneeboard, but it can only hold 3. So that's how you place down regular waypoints. If you want to place down the special points, you click this blue button, and then click Add, and then just place it wherever you want. And then in the comment box, you have to type in the name. I'll put a picture in the video that shows the name for the different special points, but for a surface target, I would do ST, and then click Edit, and then you can just click off. And then if I click on my plane again, you can see here's my surface target. And that's how you add points with the mission editor. And now I'll go over how to add points as the RIO. In the back seat, you add points with this computer panel right here. Now you need to know the coordinates of your waypoints. If you put them in the mission editor like I just did, you can hold right shift and click K to open your kneeboard. And you can go over to this page right here, and you can see my waypoints, and you can see my surface target I put down here. You might also see ramp and HB. HB is home base, and ramp is just the starting position of your plane. And as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, there's only 3 regular waypoints here, and all the other waypoints you put in will show up down here on the bottom. Now, since I did a hot start, my waypoints are actually already loaded into the plane. If you switch this to TAC data and then click waypoint 1, you can see range 5.2 nautical miles. And you can also see the waypoints right here. So I'm just going to add a new one. I'm just going to overwrite waypoint 3, and I'm going to put in the coordinates from waypoint 4. So to put a waypoint in, you select this to TAC data, you select the waypoint you want to edit, or you can select any of the other ones here like surface target, host area. And then you look at the coordinates in your kneeboard, or if you don't have points in your kneeboard, you can go to the F10 map and you can put your mouse over wherever you want the point to be, for example this island, and you hold left Alt and then you left click, and it will give you the coordinates here. Now there's different formats, but the format that the F-14 uses is degrees decimal minutes, which is this one here, lat long decimal minutes. But I'm just going to use the coordinates from waypoint 4 for the kneeboard. So what you do is select it like I did here. And first, we need to put the latitude coordinate in. Now, before you start typing coordinates in, I'd always recommend clicking clear first, just in case you have something up here in the scratch pad. So I'm going to click latitude, then I'm going to click north, then I'm going to type 42111, and I can double check right here, and then click enter, and then I'm going to click longitude, east, 41478, and double check here and click enter. And for the altitude, it's 19 feet. So I'm going to click altitude positive 19, and you can check here and then click enter. And that's how you type coordinates in. If you want to check the lat long of your coordinate, you can just click the lat or the long button, and it'll show the latitude and longitude. And also you can see your waypoint right here. Here's waypoint 3, waypoint 2. But I'll go over some functions with this screen a little bit later. So that was how to put in waypoints from the back seat. Now I'll go over how to put in waypoints using Jester and the F10 map. This might be useful if you're on a multiplayer server. What you do is you click this circle up here and then just click anywhere. And then I'd recommend typing something in here so you know which waypoint is yours. So I can click, let me just type DCS tutorial waypoint. Then in the front seat, you open the Jester menu. You can click A on your keyboard to open it, and you can click A again to go to the main menu. And if you've never used Jester before, if you're using a head tracker, you can look around to select the different options. But if you're not, you can hold left control and click 1 through 8. So if I do left control 5, it will go to the navigation menu. Then what you want to do is do steer point from map. And I'm going to fill in which steer point I want this to overwrite. So I'm just going to overwrite waypoint 2. And you can see my point here, DCS Tutorials Waypoint.
Copy.
And now Jester will type in these coordinates into waypoint 2. Now if I go back to the RIO Seat, if I select waypoint 2 here, you can see range is 120 nautical miles. And if I use the compass here, you can see 120 miles, so that worked. The last way you can add waypoints in as the pilot is manually. If you go to the Jester menu and go to manual entry steer point, you can select a waypoint, for example, initial point, and then you can manually type the coordinates in. Those were the different ways to add waypoints. Now I'll show you how to navigate with them. First, if you're the RIO, the way that you select waypoints to give to the pilot's display is with this switch here. So if the pilot says he wants to go to waypoint 2, I'd set this to waypoint 2. And as you do that, you'll see it'll change on this display here, range 120, and this arrow here will point to your waypoint. And that's basically exactly the same on the pilot's display right here. Also, there will be a little arrow right here for the pilot that shows where the waypoint is. If I turn the plane right now, you can see there's that little arrow. Now keep in mind, in order for this to work, you have to make sure the pilot has this in destination mode. The RIO can also select waypoints for themselves. For example, if I'm the RIO and I want to look at waypoint 1, I can click this and it will give me the range to waypoint 1. And if I click lat, it'll give me the coordinates. And you can also click clear and click altitude and it will give me the altitude. Now even though the RIO has waypoint 1 selected for his computer, whatever the pilot sees is going to be based on this. So this is set to 2, so the pilot is still seeing waypoint 2. Now how do you select a waypoint if you're the pilot and you're flying with Jester? What you do is open the menu and go to navigation and do select destination steer point. And then you can just select whatever you want. So let's say I want to select my surface target.
Copy that. Switching to our surface target.
And you can see now it's pointing to the surface target. That was basically how to create waypoints and navigate to them. Now I'll go over some extra functions with the RIO's computer. First of all, in the RIO's computer, instead of selecting these points here, you can also select them with this little stick right here. You need to have these two buttons binded, HCU half action and HCU full action. It's probably best to bind this to a 2-stage trigger, having the first stage be half action and the second stage be full action. And then you need to bind the actual movement for the HCU. If you want to bind it with buttons, you could have these ones, HCU forward, left, right, and backwards. Or you could bind the axes, which are these ones right here. So what you can do to select a point is hold down HCU half action, and you're going to see this circle, and then you can move it, and you can do HCU full action, and it will select it like that. By the way, if you're trying to move your cursor around and it's not working, make sure you have TID cursor selected right here. And in this little box here, it actually tells you what's selected. So right now I have a waypoint, but if I select this square right here, now I have my surface target. And if you want to unselect something, you can just do half action and let go, and it will unselect it. Now if you don't have anything selected, this is going to show you own aircraft, and from there you can click these buttons to give you information. For example, I can click lat and it will show my own coordinates. You can also click clear and click alt to give you the altitude of your plane. If you do clear and click heading, it will show you your airspeed and also your magnetic heading. If you do speed, it'll show you your ground speed. Another thing you can do is move the center of your TID. You need to have this button, HCU offset. If you select a random area and then click HCU offset, it will offset your display. If you want to go back to normal, you can set this to ground stabilize and then back to aircraft stabilize. Speaking of ground stabilize, if you set that, then it will give you a display where it shows north as upwards. And if you go back to aircraft stabilize, then it will give you a normal display again. Some other things you can do is move waypoints. If you do half action, hover over a waypoint and do full action, you can select it. And then you can move your cursor and do full action somewhere else, and it will move your waypoint. I wouldn't recommend doing that because it might be easy to mess something up, but it is an option. It might be more useful to move something like your surface target. Also, there are some controls here. Most of these are for the radar, but there is this one you can do which will enable or disable altitude numbers, and you can also do this one which will enable or disable symbols. Now let's go over INS fixes. In most modern planes, the INS is connected to a GPS, which automatically updates it. But the F-14 doesn't have a GPS, which means that as you're flying, the INS system becomes degraded, and it will become less and less accurate on longer flights. So if you're going on a long flight, you might want to update the INS system, which is called doing a fix. There's 3 types of fixes. You can do a visual fix, a TACAN fix, and a radar fix. First, I'll go over a visual fix. The way that a visual fix works is that you choose a really obvious geographic location, and then when you're flying over it, you click the fix button and it will realign your navigation system. So in my plane, I'm going to make waypoint 1 right over this lake right here, and then when I fly over that lake, I'm going to do my fix. There's the lake over there, so I'm going to get ready to do my fix. First, you need to select your waypoint. You can either do it by going to TAC data and clicking it right here, or you can select it right here. Then what you do is you're going to put this to nav, and when you fly over it, you're going to click visual fix. So now that I'm in the middle of the lake, I'm going to click visual fix, and then you can click fix enable, or if you feel like you messed it up, you can click visual fix again and it will deselect it. Now let's go over how to do a TACAN fix. In order to do a TACAN fix, you need to have one of your waypoints right on a TACAN station. I'm going to put waypoint 1 right over the TACAN station in Kobuleti. First, you need to turn on your TACAN. I'm going to click this to have the RIO take control of the TACAN. And I'm going to make sure it's on transmit receive. And the TACAN code for Kobuleti is 67 X-ray. So make sure this is on X, this is on 67 already, make sure this is on normal. And it looks like the big pointer is pointing to the TACAN, and I'm getting a range of 8 miles, so it looks like the TACAN is on. Then you need to select your waypoint. I'm going to select waypoint 1 here, and then set this to nav, and then you can do TACAN fix. And then once again, you can click fix enable, or if you decide you don't want to, you can just deselect TACAN fix. Lastly, I'll show you how to do a radar fix. For a radar fix, once again, you want to choose an obvious geographic location. I'm going to choose this island right here. Then, once again, you want to just select your waypoint like normal. Then you want to put your radar into pulse search mode, which is this one right here. And you want to take the erase switch and put it all the way off. And this will make contacts stay on your radar for a longer time, so it's easier to tell what the ground looks like. Then you can use this switch right here, which will adjust the elevation of the radar, and you can see it move here. And you want to point the radar slightly down until you start seeing stuff show up on the ground. Also, make sure you adjust the range right here. My island is about 30 miles away, so I'm just going to put the range to 50. Now, it can be hard to try to get it to show up on the radar, so there are some things you can adjust. You can use this to adjust the brightness of the radar screen, and if you use these two knobs, pulse gain and pulse video, these change the darkness of the contacts. And you can use these switches here. If you use the azimuth scan switch, it will change how wide the radar scans back and forth. And if you use the elevation bars, it will change how far up and down it will scan. What I'd recommend doing is I'd recommend having the scan to 40 and the elevation bars on 4. I'd recommend having erase all the way down and pulse video all the way up. And then you can adjust the gain to choose the darkness that you want. And I'd turn the brightness down a little bit so the contacts are a little easier to see. And also, if you use this switch to adjust the elevation, it adjusts it in large amounts. You can use these keybinds, HCU thumb down, up, and recenter, and those will adjust the elevation in small amounts. If you do thumb wheel forward, it'll go up in small amounts. If you do thumb wheel backwards, it'll go down in small amounts. And if you click thumb wheel toggle, it'll recenter it. So that should help you to kind of fine-tune the elevation. In this case, I had the elevation just pointed slightly down, and I turned my gain all the way up to make it as dark as possible. Once I found the lake, I kind of fine-tuned it. I reduced the width that it's scanning, and I reduced the elevation bars. And the island is probably right around this area right here. Now, as you can see, even after doing all this, it's still hard to kind of see what I'm looking for on the radar, so it's probably better to do a visual fix or a TACAN fix. But anyway, let's go ahead and do the radar fix. Make sure your waypoint is selected like I mentioned earlier, and then you want to set your stick here to DDD cursor, and you want to hold half action, place it over where your waypoint is, and then do full action to select it, and then set this to nav and click radar fix. And then if you want, you can click fix enable, or if you want to cancel it, you can just reselect radar fix. Now, one quick thing to note about INS fixes: do not do an INS fix with a surface target point, because if you do an INS fix with a surface target, it will not realign your INS, it will just move the surface target. For example, if I wanted to use my radar to place down a surface target, what I could do is I could select surface target here, select DDD cursor, and let's say I want to place a surface target right there. Then I can click radar fix and I can click fix enable, and you can see that didn't align my INS system, that just placed down a surface target. So you can use any of these INS fix methods to place down a surface target. Another thing to go over is manual mode. On this panel down here, I already went over destination and TACAN. AWL and vector are for the data links, so I won't be going over those in this video. But if you click manual, this allows you to set a manual heading and course on your navigation display, but most of the time you're probably going to be in destination. The last thing to go over is the AHRS, which is kind of like a backup navigation system. Most of the time when you're flying, you're going to be in nav mode right here. But if your INS fails, you can put it into one of these backup modes. If you put it into IMU mode, it will be kind of like a half AHRS, half INS system. So that's for if some of the functions of your INS are not working, you can use IMU. But if your INS is completely messed up, you can put it into AHRS mode. Now, in DCS, you're probably never going to need to do this, but I just thought I would mention it. Some other things to mention is that the manual said it's okay to switch it from INS to AHRS and back, because AHRS is a completely separate system. So if you switch to this first one here, AHRS, it's not going to mess up your INS. You can go back to INS if you want. But it said if your INS is working fine, don't switch it to IMU mode, because if you switch it to IMU mode, it's going to start degrading your INS. So only switch it to IMU mode if your INS is actually messed up and you need to use the backup system. The pilot's seat also has a control panel for the AHRS here. There's these different modes. If you have it on DG mode, that's directional gyro, and that will use a gyroscope for your compass. If you have it on slaved, it will still be using a gyroscope, but it will also be slaved to the magnetic compass, so it will be more accurate. And if you set it to compass, it will not use the gyroscope at all, it will just be magnetic. I'd recommend just leaving it in slaved mode. Also, it has these other controls here. Here you can set the latitude of your aircraft, and you can have it on north or south. And with this button, if you hold it down, you can realign the gyroscope. And if you hold it down and turn it, you can adjust the heading of the gyroscope. But I wouldn't really mess with it. I would just leave all these in their default positions, and I would just leave this in slaved mode. Once again, you're probably never going to even need to use the backup modes in DCS. I just thought I'd mention it. That was navigation for the F-14. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you later.